And I'm going to hand it over to Aynisa Leonardo, who is really our facilitator extraordinaire. If you've been to a veterans program, you've probably seen Aynisa in the past. Someone who's also really helped us to make this programming what it is in the past few years. So appreciate your time again, Aynisa, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Amelia, and thank you, NASW, for hosting these amazing webinars. The reason I love these so much is because of the panels that they bring in, and the fact that the content and the program itself is driven by a veteran advisory committee, like Amelia said. So not only is the content, we hope, relevant in the presentation that we're offering, but it's driven by and inspired by veterans themselves in terms of generating what topics we feel are important, they feel are important. I myself am not a veteran, I'm a civilian. I've been doing this work for about 17 years and have had the pleasure of, as a clinician, of working with veterans and their families throughout the years. Gotten close with many of them inside and outside of work environments, and have learned a lot. So my passion behind this is working with an amazing group, but also kind of giving that gift of knowledge base. That's why we do these, is to empower clinicians with the skills that they may need to better serve the community of veterans and their families. So this topic specifically is focused on hiring and retaining veterans in the workforce, right? So I wanted to add that word in there, and it's woven throughout the slides I'm going to present to you now. I have about 15 slides, which takes about 15 minutes to get through. And it's really just to get us all on the same page in terms of the material and getting us kind of like a foundation to launch off from when we segue into the panel. The panel consists of these wonderful names in front of you and some of the faces you see here. And instead of reading bios, because that would take like a half hour, because they are stacked with experience, the first question is going to be, introduce yourself, tell us about you, and then also answer the question. So when we get to that, please, panelists, just be prepared to tell the attendees about yourselves and the experience you bring to the table. So some information that, again, I think is just helpful when we're talking about this topic is, there's some statistics I'm going to bring up, but there's a lot of buzz about hiring veterans and veterans in the workforce. And we did a presentation recently regarding veterans in higher education and school systems, and really helping to support the reintegration process through employment and higher ed and advancement of careers and all of those wonderful things and all of those wonderful buzzwords. And some companies even have incentives for hiring veterans for their companies. And I would like to focus on that, but also on retention of veterans within the workforce, right? So what avenues can we support, pave the way for, in terms of not just bringing them in the door, but like keeping veterans as assets within our civilian community? So these do not apply to everybody, but I always think, like, as a clinician, when I have a veteran I'm working with, it's chances are they're not in the best place at that moment. Usually they're coming into my office in some state of shambles, like, I need help with XYZ. The goal in therapy is to get all people, to a place of like their best self, right? Like my optimal self. So I don't want to stigmatize the issue and be like, hey, veterans facing employment issues all have mental health, for example, right? That's not the case. But for many, the barriers that we see have to do with things like the reintegration process, transitioning, plugging themselves back into like a family and a work environment that makes sense to them, finances, childcare, relationships, difficulty with communication, could have mental health woven into it, right? Specifically things like trauma, depression, anxiety could be a barrier for somebody's motivation. And we're not talking about just finding work. We're talking about finding a purpose and a second career. So my quarter life crisis, I hope it's quarter life 25, right? Like, we all kind of go through that. Who am I? What do I want to be when I grow up? I know it was hard for me as a civilian in my 20s. It was very hard for me. And I remember having like those breakdown moments of, this is a big decision. I don't know where I want to invest my life in terms of my career. And it felt huge, to the point of depression and anxiety at times, right? So, and I didn't feel like predisposed with those conditions. So it's a really hard decision for some. And it's just good to be mindful of that turning point that many veterans face when they're transitioning out of this giant career that they just had. They lived a lifetime of career, chances are, within their military experience. Then they have to transition into something new. So there's an intimidation factor with that for many. Again, it doesn't have to be for all, right? I don't want to like universalize everything we're talking about today. And then on the hiring side, many people look at a veteran as like a lion. What do I do with this person, right? Like, you might not want to hire a lion. That might be something that's intimidating on the civilian side. And there's this translation, I think, that we can bridge better within the community between veterans and the civilian workforce, right? So I talk a lot about that on both ends because I think there is accountability on both ends, and I try to empower veterans to communicate their skills and assets more clearly and translate them to civilian language because they are hireable and they do have a lot of assets and what we call transferable skills that they don't always like recognize. And they might say things like, I don't have this degree or I don't have that, type of experience, but military skills do translate in many different ways. And for some, the military skills they have may not translate to what they want to do now, but they have the ability to, work skills do. So the ability to hold a job, to have a career, to have discipline and structure and goals, right? Those are skills that do translate. So as a clinician, again, like we want to give you guys kind of a jump start if you have somebody who you're working with and it's someone with military experience and they mention employment as something that they're struggling with, there's a lot to consider there. And obviously the panel is going to highlight this topic much better than me, but I do want to set that ground point for us. So first responders, right? And we're talking, this is like military, police, fire, anyone who has a first responder experience. These are people that are natural born leaders, right? These are people that generally do have a strong set of skills. And I list some of them here, not pulled from Google. This is just pulled from like my brain in terms of like, these are veterans I've worked with. And struggles that they've communicated to me are usually rooted in their assets, which is kind of interesting. So a lot of times they are problem solvers, action oriented. They have very high standards, purpose driven. With that, there comes the high standards and expectations. They expect follow through. They hold others to their standards as well. Appreciate communication and direct communication. Not so much on the corporate jargon, right? Want to be involved, want to be informed, work really well with things like accountability, want to be heard, want to be empowered and part of a team, and they like room for advancement. The unemployment rate for veterans is actually lower than the unemployment rate for non-veterans. However, there's a very high number of veterans who leave their first job outside of the military within the first year. So the ability to find a job may be less of a barrier, but the ability to retain that job and feel satisfaction and feel worth within it could come up. For vets who have been in combat zones and who have been deployed, some of them feel a stronger challenge in terms of translating certain skills. And, clinically, again, we're speaking freely, and I'm going to take the liberty of doing that as well, even though I haven't served. But many of them will say things like, I was just using a weapon, like in a combat zone. How am I going to step into, the bank to to interview for a job? Like, it makes no sense to me. I can't even bridge that gap. And I don't know how to explain it to my employer, right? And I'll let you guys on the panel explain that transition a little bit more openly, right? But I know that there's a lot of apprehension there in terms of how do I communicate my skill set in the military, because oftentimes it's very specific, and whether or not it's combat related, there are veterans who do not have a combat related military experience who still see that hurdle in terms of translating and communicating about their skills. So how to support a veteran seeking employment. Many employers don't understand the value that a veteran can bring to them and are hesitant to take a chance. They see it as potentially a risky hire, right? They're not really sure. Some don't, the good ones don't, but there are companies who don't really understand the value from this population. And then on the other side, veterans may not be familiar with the civilian job market, right? And how to navigate that. So having patience, trying to explain those things. Translation of skills is a really good thing to encourage, as well as communication skills. Self-advocacy. Like if I'm working with a veteran who's speaking to me about this, I'm going to kind of teach them how to self-advocate, persistence, and really the big one is like pursuing what you are interested in, finding that purpose. Where is the traction going to be in this next set of life goals that you're trying to establish? Transitioning from military to civilian life is sort of like a retirement. And some people go through it after 20 or 30 years of service, and some people go through it after 5 years of service. You have a 26-year-old who's retiring out of the military, but it's the same concept. It's the same mindset of like, I invested in this career. And there are some who are medically retired. So it's not even a choice. It's not necessarily something they wanted. They envisioned being in for the duration of their career. And it's a big curveball for many. And for others, it's more calculated and strategic, and they still need support in navigating what that looks like for sure. So, again, I don't want to stigmatize or give assumptions, right? I always say, like when I'm doing these trainings, try to put assumptions aside. Sometimes people with a service history can be black and white thinkers, right? So they can't even like navigate the abstract. And that idea of like allowing certain chapters to close so others can open is a really good therapeutic tool that teaches a lot of people with service histories, not just with employment, but with other things as well. And again, these are just like tips and pointers from one clinician to however many we have, 200 clinicians or so. And then understanding and supporting them through the process, right? It's something that may not happen overnight, and walking with them through that path, even if there are low points along the way where somebody might feel disheartened. A few things that the panelists brought up during our prep session, the transition process out of the military and how it doesn't really necessarily cover career goals or school goals in a way that is super helpful. So that being kind of like something that might be missing. Sequencing, that was a great tool. I know you guys are going to talk about it more in just a few minutes here, but this idea of building blocks and that patience, and this is my end goal. I want to be a business owner, or I want to be a lawyer, right? I have a very close friend of mine who's an Army combat vet, who is now a very successful lawyer. And yes, there were ups and downs along the way until he got there, but encouraging that, like, these are the building blocks, these are the steps that need to be taken, and focusing on one at a time is really helpful. And then understanding and allowing other life areas to come into play along this journey. So family, community, peers, health services, reintegration, motivation is a big one. It's hard to be motivated sometimes with these decisions. Rest and self-care, allowing yourself to take those moments and those breathers to kind of reset if things are not going the way that you want or expect. There are so many career options. They are endless. This list could be hundreds of bullet points long, no different than any civilian, except maybe expanded into other areas that veterans are potentially more equipped for based on their military experience, things like defense work or healthcare. But many pursue avenues listed here. And then the dots on the bottom, obviously, the list goes on and on. But from the panel today, you'll see people from like this mix of work. And it's good to just, take note of that. All right, almost there. I think I have one more slide for you guys. Negative stereotypes and media-driven stereotypes. Elephant in the room, we have to talk about it. A lot of employers, when you get them talking, they're like, I don't really want to hire veterans because they have anger issues, right? Or whatever that stereotype is. And so it ticks off veterans. They get annoyed by this. Like, I don't want to be clumped into a category. I don't want people to make assumptions about me. Like, I have all of these other parts of my personality. I'm not just XYZ. I didn't just serve. So what I always try to teach is just that idea of the stereotypes exist. It's unfortunate that you have to kind of like recognize it. But I found that the more aware that they are, the more we talk about it, it actually like reduces and brings down those guards and those barriers a little bit more. So it's good to talk about, as opposed to leaving it as like this, this big unknown thing. And then again, when we're talking about retention, right, what does that look like? hiring incentives are great, might get you in the door, but how do we keep veterans engaged? A big one on a bunch of surveys that I read was like the ability for advancement. Like veterans want to grow, a lot of them want to stay with agencies and see where they can go and where they can develop. And that plateau, that ceiling effect that does exist within the civilian job market sometimes can be a big deterrent. Providing support, encouraging development and advancement for us on the civilian side, just understanding that they are used to like structured hierarchy. So sometimes like allowing that to translate as well. And then helping them develop goals that are in alignment with what they want to do. It's a big one. All right, so this is our panel for today. Wonderful group of people here. I don't know who wants to start or who might feel compelled to jump in, but my first question is really going to be how we started our prep meeting a couple of weeks ago. Why is this topic important to you? Why is it relevant to you? And if you could roll that into introducing yourself and kind of just telling us about your experience and what brought you here today.
I can kick it off.
Go ahead, Dylan. Thank you.
Oh, because he has the
Yeah.
fancy mic.
The other one, the Matthew. No, it's all good.
Matthew, sorry. Go ahead, Matthew.
No worries. So for me, this topic is extremely important because I am a veteran, and so I went through this experience, and I went through, and I got out in 2020. I served for 12 years in the Army. And I got out because of a medical injury. So it was kind of a surprise. Not the plan. Was planning to do the full 20 years. And so now 4 years later, I still consider myself to be in transition, because there were so many different paths to go down. I started 2 different businesses, consulting oriented businesses. And then I worked for a company in a sales position that was based outside of the country. And then I worked for a public institution, a government-oriented institution, that was the Small Business Development Center. And so that was kind of going back into that side of the house. So I've gone through these transitions from the military into entrepreneurship, into working for a private organization in sales in a different country, and working back again inside of the kind of public domain. And so I understand the difficulty in making these transitions. And one of the most important things that I've found was communication and culture. I guess the 2 things is communication and culture, and communication about the culture. It's one of the most important things because, I mean, each veteran's going to be different as they go through their experience, depending on how much time they spent in, what were the leadership attributes of those that they were around as they progressed through, there we go. And so just all of that to say, with all of the experience that I had in the different transitions, that is one of the most important things to me, is finding a way to help smooth out that transition, to help veterans to be able to find their place, and whether it be starting their own business, because I helped a lot of veterans do that at the Small Business Development Center, or to just find their place in the workforce. And so that's why it's important to me. And just a little bit of my background in a little bit more detail. So like I said, I spent 12 years in the Army, but the first 4 years I spent as a Stinger missile crew chief. The next 8 years I spent as an intelligence analyst. I was asked to join the Protective Services Detachment on their forward deploying teams to protect the Secretary of Defense, Chief of Staff of the Army, Secretary of the Army, folks like that, in the DoD. And I was also had the opportunity to go to school and become a jump master so I could run the airborne operations, which ultimately was the reason that I got injured. So came full circle on that one. Yeah, so now I'm actually working for this resilience and leadership training certification company now called RBLP, Resilience Building Leadership Program. Helps veterans and anybody get nationally recognized certification, which is something that I've worked with a lot of veterans on to help boost their resumes and things like that. And I'm also going to grad school for industrial and organizational psychology at Clemson right now. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Mhm.
Let's
Um,
jump.
I think Dylan wants to go. She said with a prompt.
Do I have to?
You're a Marine. Marines lead.
Hey everyone, my name is Dylan Damboise, and as you can pick up from context clues, I was in the United States Marine Corps. My life, I guess the best way you can say it is, I have not had the best veteran experience, but I've had far from the worst. Much like Matthew, I still consider myself in transition. I left the Marine Corps 2017, 4 years in, one and done term. And I was so happy to finally leave the Marine Corps. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And actually, ironically enough, I also fit into that very obvious statistic of the first job I got, I did not hold a year. Genuinely, it was just more physical labor, and I was trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do? Because sure, I was told there's a lot of things that I could be doing by, I believe it was TAPS was the program at the time, that was the transition program to help you get out of the military. But really, at most, it was like, you can get benefits, here's how you get benefits, and let me take you to a job fair, which wasn't particularly in-depth and did not help me figure out my trajectory from something I had dedicated 4 years of my life to, then proceeded to get out and then have 0 certifications in. Because funny thing is, most of the time, the military, at least especially the Marine Corps, will not give you the certifications you need to do the job in the civilian world. So I was adrift for a little while trying to figure that out. And I threw myself into VA advocacy. And I found that really helped fix a lot of the problems I was having because I didn't have community. I was in emotional turmoil with my wife at the time. And genuinely, we were just not having a good go of it because I just had no idea what to do or where to go. But VA advocacy and the ability to be there for other veterans really helped to mend a rift. And through that, I was actually able to find a job opportunity with a law firm that actually helped veterans get their VA disability benefits. And I was like, wait a second, I kind of know stuff about that. I'm kind of interested in law. Sure, I'd like to try and go for that. I interviewed, slammed it in the first day. 1 month later, I was now a paralegal helping do that. I had did that for 2 years, and it had helped me understand my place in the workplace, how people view me in the workplace, what I represent in a workplace, and the opportunities for me there because of it as a veteran. And after understanding all of that, I was then able to find my trajectory, and I now find myself using the VOC Rehab, or VRNA as it's now called, education system. That would not have happened unless I was literally put on the trajectory that I wanted to be put on by my job search.
Thank you, Dylan.
Why don't I go next? This is Lily Lee. I'm a civilian advocate and a specialist in career networking content. By that, I mean that I specialize in resumes, LinkedIn profiles, and professional or executive biographies. I care about the veteran population because I am a direct beneficiary, if you will, of an elderly maternal uncle who immigrated to the United States when the Chinese Exclusion Act was still in force. He was called up to and in fact served during World War II. He and his wife, my aunt, then sponsored both my parents, my 2 brothers and me to immigrate legally to the United States and ultimately to become naturalized citizens. So I am thankful literally to the United States Army for my present American citizenship. That's for starters. The short answer to why I want to advocate on behalf of the military community is frankly September 11. Before that, I was much of a pacifist and didn't give much thought to our national security. At the time, I was a longtime New Yorker, and I was displaced, it turns out, permanently from my staff editing position at the Wall Street Journal, who, those of you who may remember, reported that Lower Manhattan resembled nuclear winter, very, very unfortunately. I also had been thinking, in about the dozen years or so since I left corporate America, what would be the most deserving demographic in American society? And it came to me pretty quickly that it was veterans, hands down. Nobody even comes close. And I apologize in advance if anyone is offended. My services are available gratis to the military community. By that, I mean active duty, veterans, military spouses, and dependents who are of age to work legally in the United States. I run workshops and LinkedIn sessions, both in person and on Zoom or virtually, at various SVA chapters throughout the New York area. I find that the Student Veterans of America has really been the most receptive platform through which I, as an ordinary civilian, can network and find those who are interested in my assistance. That's sort of my short answer.
Thank you, Lily. Karen, you want to jump in?
Absolutely. Specifically after I said, please don't let me have to follow that impressive bio. But that's thank you for just jumping in, Lily, and doing that. My name is Karen Kraft. If you can, I'm going to give me a shout out back. I'm from Rochester, New York, with family in Buffalo as well. Go Bills. Former Army. I had someone in my family serve for generations. So when I wanted to go to the Peace Corps, it made sense that I ended up in the Army. I served so long ago, it feels like, thank you, Jennifer, right there. Feels like a different lifetime, which relates to this panel. And I want to thank everybody, by the way, for all your interest in being here, not just for the credits, but for helping fellow veterans. And I do appreciate all the stories you're putting in here. So I did my service. I went ROTC in Western New York at Cornell, got out through Ithaca College, served some more, got out. I worked at Discovery Channel International right when it was just growing. So I traveled all over the world for a decade. It was phenomenal. And got on, I've been running my own company. So what I learned is that since I'm in entertainment, I came out to Los Angeles, and I run a group as a volunteer for 12 years called Veterans in Media and Entertainment. And what we do is we help veterans find their way into the industry, because like everybody's just touched on, like Matt and Dylan, and like Lily knows from her experiences, and you'll hear from so many others, there is no roadmap in Hollywood. So think about this: when you leave the US military, you know everything you need to do to get promoted on how to actually move, right, Matt? Right, Dylan? Like there's just like exactly down to the physical fitness, the tests, the pictures you have to put in your promotion package, etc. The rest of the world is not that organized. And so you're leaving something that has shown you exactly how to advance to a world that says, figure out your own transition. And for most of you who've left, as Aynisa said, when you leave college, right, this whole transition, I love the 20s reference, we're all figuring out where to invest our time and effort. So you've already invested time and effort in the military, and you have an identity there, and you have an identity of service to something larger than yourself. And it's particularly if those who served in combat, I never did, they feel, I mean, there's nothing more difficult or dangerous than being that kind of person, or a first responder, someone is doing that. So it's hard to find purpose. A lot of veterans come out to Hollywood. We're a group of over 5,800 nationwide, half of them mostly active. Several of our members have been nominated for Academy Awards. 11 are currently working in television shows. But what we really discovered in 2012, when two young veterans started this, fresh out of the Iraq War, they wanted to find other vets working in the business, is most vets do not want to identify in the business. They do not want to be identified as a veteran for several different reasons. One is they feel that the warrior in the war get confused at times. There, you can be seen as you did the military's less best chance, or I don't understand your culture, or as the slideshow aptly said, you're going to be this alpha type in the room. And so rather than finding people that are all like you, allies, sometimes you shut it down because you're like, I'm in this military mode where you need to figure things out yourself before you go to your supervisor and say, I mean, that's a nice way of saying sergeant or senior officer, and say, hey, I have an issue. And they're going to say, what have you done to try to resolve that? Because if you haven't tried to figure it out yourself, you shouldn't be taking up my time, because we have to move on to the mission. You can see Melanie and Dylan and Matt all nodding heads, right? That's the core. So opposite in the civilian world, when people join our group, I tell them there is no roadmap. You have to put on this new hat and be an explorer. You have to give yourself permission to try new things. And here's the good news, everyone. We're not trees, so we can change and move just like we did in the military and be flexible. So the number one trait that I tell veterans that they need, that they had in the military, was flexibility. To hurry up and wait, be fluid. You are water now, because you're going to figure out yourself. And by the way, that's a lifetime journey. Nobody really figures it out, because I personally believe we live many lifetimes in our life. And so what we try to do in our group is just help veterans find mentors. We're peer-to-peer resource sharing. We do online education, much like this class, throughout the year. And we rely on great studio friends to help us do career days and help bring veterans in. One of which, I think Melanie and I will both give a big shout out, is to Betty Diaz. So when you talk to her, literally during COVID, when everybody ran the other way, she ran to us at Paramount Veterans Network. So big shout out to her and her team. So what I particularly do is have this joy, and I volunteer to do this because there's nothing more satisfying in life than finding someone find their way. And I have been well helped, and I continually, unfortunately, need a lot of help. So it's nice to give back. So that's my story. Go Bills. Yeah. This Sunday, 10 a.m. East Coast. Sorry. Who's saying that out loud?
Thanks, Karen. That was also well said.
Thank you. Oh, thank you for that leadership that you gave us in that first round too. Even while driving a car, I wish I had that multi-skill.
Am I next?
Betty, yes, you want to jump in?
Last but not least. They all said great things. No, I'm kidding. Thank you, Karen, and go Giants. Her and I have a bit of a rivalry. So I am Betty Diaz. I am a civilian. I did not serve, and my story started out very simple. I have a cousin who got wounded while he was in Iraq, and I went to see him at the hospital, and he was nearly 70% burned and just really, really wounded. And I actually got PTS from the experience, and I said, I have to do something for this community. So I started volunteering at my old job with the veterans group there and planned events. So this was just all volunteer. And then fast forward, I'm now at Paramount, and I was still volunteering, but then there was an opportunity to become the person who does all of the veteran initiatives for the company. And so here I am. So it started out as a volunteer role. Now it's my day job. And one of the things that we do, because we do a lot of things, is help with veteran hiring. And I created a program called Veteran Immersion Program. And it started because I was upset because they wouldn't place veterans that graduated or weren't students into roles. And I said, we got to create a program where it doesn't matter if they're a student veteran or not, wherever they're at in their journey. They could be 1 year in transition or 10 years or 15 like Matthew. I'm kidding, Matthew. So we're here to place them and have, you know, they can have an experience. Again, this is for veterans who are interested in media or roles that are within media that can support your journey. So if you want to be, you know, something else, I can't help you with that. And so from there, you know, I met Karen Kraft with Veterans in Media and Entertainment, and I'm like their #1 fan, and I did run to her, as she said. So every time we have opportunities, she's my go-to because they really do care about their membership. And I know that, you know, they're interested in media and we do anything we can. And she mentioned career days, and we actually have one coming up soon. And so we're excited about doing that one. And that's pretty much it. So my reason of why I care for this topic, it just landed organically into this place. It started off with me raising my hand saying, what can I do to help? And so here I am today. And thank you, Melanie and team, for inviting me.
All right. So ultimately, we want to kind of like get to the point of, and I'm getting ahead of us, but to our attendees who are all here, right? Over 200, almost 300 people, how can they better support this initiative of hiring and retaining veterans and supporting veterans in these transitions that we're talking about? So we want to get to that point. So we'll kind of like build up to that. So let's start with challenges, guys. Like what challenges should clinicians, advocates, supporters be aware of, and or can you disclose some challenges that you personally had in your transition from one career to another?
Yes.
You knew that question was for you, Dylan.
And that was the answer.
Can you expand on that?
Very well. So pretty much picture everything that can go wrong that has already probably has gone wrong for the veteran. You either come out of the military not knowing what you want to do and trying to figure out like what you want, trying to transition into a workplace, and it's mostly determining what you want out of a workplace. And then it's trying, depending on where you are in your transition, trying very hard not to scare your potential employer. Veterans tend to be very matter of fact when they speak, not big on the jargon, and they seem kind of direct at times. It's super helpful when you're communicating something, not so much on, how it's received, though. So let's say you're trying not to figure out what you're trying to do. You manage not to scare your employer. You're now trying to not scare your coworkers. All of those things tend to be very daunting depending on where you are in your transition. Because you're very much now a different animal compared to the rest of the civilians in the room a lot of the time. And that's not to say you're this big alpha chat or something. That's genuinely everyone's now looking at you like you're different the moment they become aware you are a veteran. And everyone gives that gentle nod. It's like, yeah, I immediately ask the questions. Does he have PTSD? Has he shot someone? And those are the things you'll be constantly dealing with from your coworkers for some time. And mileage may vary in that, and some people may have some issues being asked that question like 16 times over the course of 2 months. Beyond that, I think it's mostly a matter of balancing the perceptions of how other people see you is probably one of the biggest hurdles for veterans to go through, as well as trying to adjust to a new lifestyle because you're now out of the military and you're looking for a new routine. Like Matthew, help me out here. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but first few times out of the military when you're going for a job, is it what is it? Is it like you're talking to an entirely different being because you're so used to talking with other service members and you feel like everyone's kind of scared of you, or is it like the lack of routine or trying to find that routine again that's really grinding?
So that it's really interesting. This kind of goes back to what Karen was talking about. And specifically when she mentioned the idea of flexibility, I think of adaptability and being able to adapt to different situations, but that's not at the forefront of veterans' minds when they're going up and applying for that job, especially the first couple of times. That's not, their head's not in that space. It's more anxious. Do they understand? And a lot of it comes from a lack of confidence in their ability to effectively communicate their skill set. And so they go in with a resume that they probably built off of, in the Army, we would call them NCOERs or OERs, so basically just the leadership evaluation reports that we would have done. And those have a very specific style. And it does not translate to the private or civilian sector. And so there are services out there that can help you do this exactly like Lily was talking about. Thank the good Lord for her. But a lot of people don't go through that, and they just try to wing it and do it on their own, because that is a tendency that we have in the veteran community, is that, well, I'm just going to figure this out on my own, and reaching out for help is a sign of weakness. And so I'm just going to push forward, you know, put my nose to the grindstone and just make this thing happen. But I think that there's something that happens, because when you're in the military, even if you're in a leadership position or not, it doesn't matter. You always have somebody that you're answering to. And there's always a regiment. There's always, it's the indoctrination is robust and it's very deep. And so entering into another workspace, like I would say my transition to my first job, that I actually went through a skill bridge program. So in the transition, I went through a service to software, which should have actually been called service to sales. I don't know why they call it software, but it was to learn how to sell. And when I showed up, like, this is the company I was discussing earlier that was based out of London, and the culture, I mean, one, it wasn't even American culture. It was British culture. And so that was a culture shock, but also the way in which they managed the work, because I was working remote, and I got out in 2020 when COVID was in full force. I started my transition in April of 2020, finished in August. And the culture there was very much, we expect you to do whatever you need to do and figure out whatever you need to figure out on your own, and just go through the paces, and you'll probably come to us, I guess, if you need help, but just kind of do your job. And so that left me in a place that was just very wandering, especially working remote for the first job out with a bunch of Brits, no offense. And just
So
all of that put
with
together.
Double culture shock and
Yep.
spiraling.
Right. And it was, and a lot of it was, you know, we're used to being physically around people, for one, and being around people who, and being in not even just the leaders, but just the organization has goals, and you know your role in that organization, and you know exactly the steps. This goes back to, I believe, what Karen was saying, where everything is so clearly laid out. Like, I was able to thrive in the military because it was like, if you want to succeed, do this, and then prepare for that, know this, go to the board, stand in front, look nice, answer the questions clearly and effectively. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to follow that roadmap. And just like Karen was saying, that doesn't exist. That's not a thing. And so I think there's an expectation on the side of the employer, the person that's interviewing. I think it's important to realize that, and just to take that into consideration during the process, and to communicate clearly. A lot of times veterans aren't even going to know the right questions to ask. And so understanding these, going into the nuance here, and taking the time to ask them these questions, and kind of like, what are their expectations, and communicate clearly about what the roles are, what they're supposed to do in these different situations, and just work with them. But yeah,
Matt, can I
I've been speaking
right
for too
there and
long,
grab
so
onto something?
please.
So it's really awesome that you said that, where you talk about like the interviewer or the employer's like role and how veterans are received, or the chance that the veterans actually know what they're getting themselves into, because that was a very hard thing to find. But amongst the few people who have really helped me with that, one of them happens to be on the panel right now. Hi, Betty. So this is first time college Dylan. Still very bad at school. Why he joined the military in the first place. Trying to figure out like, well, what can I do to? And I hear that Paramount it has a like veterans internship program through, and I heard about that through Melanie. And Betty was able to explain things incredibly well, put task-oriented things in front of me. She heard what I was good at and what I wanted to do, and she put me in front of those things. It's like, okay, cool. We're going to be doing a webinar. We're going to be doing that. So you did IT and you know tech stuff. It's like, yes, great. And put me right to work there. And as it turns out, they had Blizzard Entertainment and a bunch of other things that I happen to be knowledgeable of. And she actually put me in front of the things to actually voice my opinion in that. But Betty has worked wonderful with veterans, not just including myself. So I think she's probably one of the best examples of what employers can do and what people can do to kind of pull out what's necessary from a veteran in terms of like a peer or an interviewer to an interviewee. Where Lily, on the other hand, is a wizard of administration power. Genuinely, the ability to look at the absolute knot that is like a veteran's paperwork and sum of experiences and jargon. And then you proceed to go, and then she will translate that over into corporate talk and actually make you seem like a normal human being with something to contribute.
Dylan, you're talking about the resume, right?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. Well, thank you for
Yes.
the very kind words. One piece of advice that I would have for everyone, and I would be curious to know whether the three vets can share with me. Have you felt that these hiring managers, potential colleagues, tried to meet you at least halfway when you were being interviewed for a real job? That's one thing I'd like to think that corporate America is doing, because there's a lot of rah-rah and, let's join the parade, join hands and sing Kumbaya. But once Memorial or Veterans Day is over, then everything is forgotten. And again, I'm going to apologize in advance if I offend anyone. I have yet to meet a veteran who tells me, yes, I remember the employment workshop I was required to sit through very clearly, even though I was being fed information like drinking out of a fire hose. All right. As you ETS, you're expected to basically remember all this information that is shot at you for like what, between 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. And sadly, you're not always given the choice to choose to sit through these employment workshops up to 2 years before your actual ETS date, right? 18 months or whatever. So the information you're given is, I'm sorry, not optimal. And what I see, and I've been trying to track this through more than a dozen years, is that the employment workshop training has gotten better over the years, but they're still not up to par with what is going to make you competitive with civilian resumes. I've sat through thousands of LinkedIn profiles and resumes in my day, and I jokingly assure everyone, including Dylan, yeah, there's literally nothing you can show me that would shock me anymore, because I basically have read everything. And I think, we're going to be basically, we're tilting at windmills if we expect the TAP or transition GPS classes to be overhauled and be better. But that's the core of the issue as I see it, because you are not being trained in the material to the standard that you need to produce competitive resumes to begin with. And so there's a lot of anxiety that I've heard about with these veterans. Everyone is obsessed with that. And everyone wants to jump in and get a job from day one. They haven't thought it through, because you don't have the luxury of sitting back. You don't have the luxury of a 6-month job search. You don't have the luxury of doing due diligence in terms of finding out whether or not a company is a good cultural match for you. I would argue that probably the best indicator of your future happiness and your longevity in a specific role is as close an alignment of values between you and that employer. And it takes a while for you to get to that stage. And this is not included, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think, in your TAP classes at all, right? The importance of doing due diligence on potential employers once you're out, if you don't take the student route or you don't take the entrepreneur route. Is that correct? No one makes mention of that. The importance of due diligence in terms of, organizational culture. I would argue that that's the most powerful predictor of an employee's long-term success and happiness in that particular job.
Lily, if I could just caveat off of that, just talking about that, in terms of long-term success and America's workplace actually interacting with veterans on all of that, because you're absolutely right about people trying to ETS or EAS and all of that. But genuinely, I was hoping to get
CEU seminar.
Somebody talking?
I promise it's not me. I know you're looking at me, Dylan. I promise it's not.
Continue, please.
So I was hoping to try and get Betty's opinion real quick, because she has, like you, Lily, has a civilian that has dealt with so many veterans and could probably give people pointers on how like to pull those like important details out of a veteran, because as you've pointed out, the military doesn't really teach us to communicate with the people whom can help us.
From my perspective, like when we do the hiring through the immersion program, I actually have to have HR with me because I'm the nice one. I'll take anyone because I'm like, we'll train them and make them good. So I'm like, as long as they're a veteran, let's go. And I have to have HR. They're like, no, but we need to make sure that they have something, like some skill or something, right? I always believe in just, you can help anybody, right? Like, what can I do to help is always what I say. You can help anybody like get to at least point A to point B. Maybe you can't get them all the way to Z, but you can help them from point A to point B. And that's an accomplishment because you're getting them there. As far as like pointers or, you know, I educate as much as I can in-house at the company. Because yeah, we do have folks who are like, oh, veterans have PTS or like whatever, right? I think you guys mentioned that earlier. And so we do some education in-house, like, no, if in fact, civilians have more PTS than veterans do, right? So, you know, there's a lot of misconceptions that we have to keep educating on. I'm a big advocate of hiring veterans. They're easy. They're so easy because they're like, what do you want me to do? They're great at accomplishing tasks right away. You don't have to micromanage them, you know, and I give it all to the military because that's the training that you're getting, right? Like you're becoming leaders, you're leading people right away. You don't have time to think, you just do. And I appreciate that. And I know Melanie one time said I could be an honorary Marine because I'm like, just, I don't want to micromanage, just get it done. So you know, I think in-house, if you're hiring folks, just give a veteran an opportunity because, you know, maybe they can't express something on a resume, but if they were in the military, and they lasted long, then they had something going on, right? Like help them out. So if you're somebody who hires, just hire them. But again, I'm easy. I'll be like, you're a veteran, let's go, I'll help you.
Betty's good enough to be former Army. That's how good she is. So I'm going to raise the bar. If I could just jump in and add to what some of the people have said. I think the transition point is so scary and frightening, and you go from a world of confidence to a world of uncertainty of mass level. And you don't want to disappoint people that you left home to go join the military, your family, your friends. Perhaps you told them you had big dreams, whatever it might be. When you leave the military, you don't want to disappoint those people. So you unnecessarily carry a lot of extra burden that you might not have known. So the first thing I ask when people join our group is I ask them who they want to be when they grow up in the short term or medium term. And can they develop a 1, 3, and 5 year kind of personal life plan? So just, you know, veterans are 3 times more likely to volunteer than a civilian. And that's that longing to belong to a group. And so what I would ask someone, if you're asking people, is, are they volunteering? Is there a group they'd be interested in volunteering? Because really, I know this is really soft and we're talking about jobs, but it's also getting stability, right? Emotional stability, helping people find this new tribe of who they need to carry through. Because the Lilies and the Bettys, they're rare, right? Who are going to be patient. Because as you heard Dylan and Matt, most often I was afraid when I left the military culture and then I was at Discovery Channel, which was very beautiful and green, that my humor wouldn't be received because we use dark humor to deal with stresses. So you're always concerned that you're going to offend someone or hurt someone's feelings when you never intend that. There's a weird thing in the military that we have to talk about separately, but where someone does something so well, you compliment them by saying, oh, you barely did it. Oh, good for you. It's a weird thing I had to learn, right? Some of my veterans have done exceptionally well. One is a lead on a TV show, and others writing on ABC's Will Trent. And I just have to say, oh my gosh, your script actually worked. And they too much praise and they crawl in. Don't praise me. It's a whole team. The whole team did this, not just me. And so I ask you to consider asking them, like Matt said, the questions, and Dylan said about them, what they're trying to do. I'm sure you do all this, but asking them if they identified anything they'd like to do outside of just the job path, because I think that helps them figure out I have found my vets figure out where they belong more, right? Because once they're starting doing something in service, things calm down. I'm now of value again because I see this perceived value. And then once I get them going on that path, it's really about saying, who are you talking to, veteran or not, in this space? Who are you reaching out to on LinkedIn or in other groups? My VME group, we don't charge membership because I want people to come and go. And I'm a strong believer in multi-generational approach to groups. And everybody knows Hollywood loves and people that are older, and never is ageist at all. I'm kidding. So, but what Hollywood has come to appreciate through my group is for every project and production and Betty can attest to that we do with them, we always bring in Vietnam vets or a Korean vet or something, because vets, and Matt and Dylan and Mel, bear me out, respect service so much. So if you see a Korean War vet or a Vietnam vet sitting there listening in this class, you're going to listen up. Because the reason why I like that is my Vietnam vets, when I hear from my younger vets getting out, I don't have answers for the pain that they carry, both visible and the more difficult ones, the invisible wounds that they're not sharing. And so I get them talking to Vietnam vets that if I can make it, so can you. If I can go through these difficulties, so can you. So that's why I like getting people involved in other volunteer groups or veteran, even if they don't have the job answer right away. Because not only, the kicker is I always tell them, it's really great for your resume and you're saving a cat or you're doing the, whatever it is, but they love it. I think I've taken a little too much time here, but and I also, hey, shout out to everybody on the panel separately who is on camera. And I know not everybody can. Thank you so much. It's a little bit easier to talk to you because there's a lot of people here and it's hard not to get a little nervous because you are all people who've chosen service as a career. And we want to thank you for that, but it's just a little easier to talk that way. So thank you.
One last obstacle, I don't know, this is my last piece for obstacles that veterans run into in this transitionary process is if you're interviewing a veteran who is not retired from the military, I would say 90%, and I'm going to lowball this one here, 90% of those veterans that are coming in that you're interviewing went through an exit hazing as they were transitioning out of the military. In that, what are you thinking? What are you planning on doing? And not in the way that's like, oh, I want to support you. Like, what are your dreams? What are your aspirations? It's like, you're never going to make it. You think you're going to go out there and you're going to start your own business? You can't even set up the tent out in the back without help from all these other guys. And it's cutthroat. And this was something that I remember watching as I was a private, as I was a junior ranking member of the military. I remember watching my colleagues go through this, and that actually inspired me as I knew that my time was coming to a close to start kind of game planning that out. And really, I planned a little bit more effectively for my transition because I knew the hazing was coming. And so if people tried to come at me with any sort of disrespect or challenge like that, then I was kind of prepared for it. But that is something that just an added pressure on them when they get out, which depends on the individual. Sometimes that pushes some people to thrive, and sometimes it pushes people down into a place where they start to buy into that exit hazing, if you will. I just came up with that now. I don't think that's a real name for anything.
I apologize for the hazing, Matt. I did not know that you would take it this many years. Kidding.
I still
Matt,
dream about it.
Yeah, if I could just jump in, this is literally the first I, as a civilian, have heard about hazing just before you leave. That's very unfortunate. And I would remind everyone to cut yourself some grace as you're transitioning, because in a way, we're expecting service members for their whole mindset to turn on a dime. You can't just turn that off after so many years, even 5 years, in service and all that. And what corporate America is looking for in terms of your career networking content is the difference you made to that deployment, that mission, that project, what have you. So it's all on but all of you have been drilled on the power of the team, of we. And so it's not overnight that you can change this whole, mindset and all that. And veterans feel such pressure to get that first job right away. It's like they can barely wait for the ink to dry if they've been issued a paper DD-214, right? So the whole process could be managed better. It's very complex. but cut yourself some grace because again, and I'm going to apologize in advance, the training you're getting in those employment workshops will not equip you, sadly, for what you need to produce and know in terms of competitive resumes, social media profiles, and professional biographies, which is what I help everyone on.
The thing that I would also like to point out is bills don't stop when you leave the military.
True.
So
Yes.
as much as we would really like, you know, to take the time to figure out our absolutely messed up lives, time waits for no one, and nothing certain's but death and taxes. And boy, do you feel it when you get out and you just realize, wow, I'm free. Crap, I'm unemployed.
It's the lucky service member whose CO allows you to start the process 2 years or 18 months ahead of the actual separation or retirement date, because there's so much information to digest. I mean, ideally, I would
Lily,
love to
have you
see
met a
I've never seen
unicorn?
it. What?
I was
What?
gonna
Have you-
say, I was gonna say that I've never met that CEO.
I've never even
Adam.
heard of that CEO.
No,
So a
it's
unicorn
absolutely
is something.
opposite.
Yeah, I mean, that's
I feel
that's
like
the
they're gonna
challenge.
get punished.
They have to retain you, right? So the last thing they
because-
want to do is make the outside world appealing.
Right. So if the CO is not going to consent, you're not going to be able to plan your transition so that you get to basically, excuse the phrase, parachute into the city where you have a job waiting for you, right? That would be really, really ideal. I've never met a service member who was able basically to line that up because the service is interested in basically, excuse the phrase, squeezing every last bit of labor out of you before you basically take off that uniform for good, right? So it's a tough time to transition. Not everyone's going to have the answer, and you don't have the luxury of time to do all this due diligence because civilians also struggle in finding their next job as well. It's just an extra layer of having to deal with dislocation. Maybe the family life is not where it could be, and you face all these other pressures, and just the underemployment and the unemployment just compounds everything. And we haven't even touched upon the issues. And again, I don't want to go there. Homelessness and suicide, very, very, dire things that happen to people once they get out of service. It's a national shame and a disgrace, quite frankly.
I think if I may add to that, Lily, thank you for jumping in. For everyone here, it's the compassion of letting people know what you're about to go through is typical of what a veteran goes through. I think it would have helped a lot of people, myself, some of my family members, if they said, hey, this is going to be a very lonely time and you're going to feel this, you're going to feel, we literally, even in the military, you go through some intense training. And when you leave that intense training group to go back to your other unit, you have the blues because you just spent every waking night and day. Entertainment is a draw for veterans because when you work on set 12, 18-hour days, right? You're in with a family achieving a goal by a set time. And that's why they come. But then once they finish that, the blues come back. So it's really, but we don't talk about that in the military. We don't say, hey, Matt, Dylan, you guys got the blues? Mel, who's feeling blue? You don't say that. There's no terminology. So I think one of the best things that I have learned to tell, especially veterans coming in of all different ages, because we get some that are 23, 24. I have some that are 60, right? And because they've just done 38 years of service. And they're trying to figure out their voice. And I was like, there's always a place for your voice. And that's why, as they are trying to figure out how to, well, for the older ones who have a draw, they can draw down on benefits. The younger ones are like, I'm about to be homeless. And so the first thing is like, if whatever your dream is, it's baby steps. It is a process. It's what we talk about sequencing, right? Nothing comes overnight. One of my friends wrote this film and it took 17 years to get to screen, and it was called Shrek. And that's her 17-year overnight success story, right? So met her years ago through a project. So that's why I try to encourage veterans to take classes at night, volunteer at night, and tell yourself you were a veteran and now you're an explorer. Even if you think you know what path you want, this is the greatest time in your life because you get to go explore. It's like going to college. Sure. You get to figure yourself out again. And I phrase it very positively, but also talking the truth about the emotion and talking about the truth that not everybody in the civilian world is going to understand the directness you bring that Dylan touched on. So it's learning this new language. It's like going to another culture, because if you tell my Marines, I will call you midweek next week at Wednesday at 5 p.m., they'll be calling me. They didn't call me. It's midweek. They didn't call me. My God, why didn't they call me? What's wrong? And they'll go into this hyperdrive. I somehow failed because you didn't call me. This is Los Angeles, the land of I love you. I may never call you, but I'll tell you that. So we have to go through these online courses of telling people they may genuinely feel like they love you at the moment, but it's not literally trying to be disingenuous with you. It's they
Right.
aren't ready to make a decision.
Karen, if it's all right, if there is just one
Please.
small interjection I'd like to make. Why am I on this panel if you knew the person who made Shrek?
Oh, well, I mean, I haven't talked to Vicky in a long time, Vicky, but
My
she
point stands.
So
Opportunities lost. The other
good
thing
point,
that I
Dylan.
really want to touch on that you brought up that was super amazing was talking about the blues. And I think what you're calling the blues and what everyone else is calling teamwork, as I believe some Rissa had brought up in the comment section, is just really advanced codependency. It's really well masked codependency. And you'll probably see that a lot in the workplace because you'll really find up your emotional attitude will directly to relate to how the job you're attending when you first get out is going. If the job's having a bad time, you're going to personalize that bad time because you have a lot of emotional energy relying on the well-being of that job because you are now codependent on the job. That is not a good relationship to have with your job. I would not recommend this to anyone.
I just real quick adding on to that is one of the things that I found to be really important is network to help you make that bridge and to, I guess, I don't necessarily want to go down the road of like the codependency thing, but this would fit that model that you're going to find other people that you can become codependent with, but hopefully in a healthy way. One of the programs that I have been a part of in the past is Team RWB, Team Red, White, and Blue. And that is a brilliant and such an amazing organization that spans, it's like everywhere. And it brings together people that are serving, veterans and civilians, people that have nothing to do with service or anything like that. And it brings them all together for a common purpose. And usually the common purpose is something along the lines of like a physical exercise. Like we're going to go for a hike, or we're going to go for a run, or we're going to go to this gym, things like that. And it was, it's powerful on multiple aspects. One is it's so important to keep up that physical wellness, but we don't realize how much that impacts the way that we think and the way we think about ourselves and reflect upon ourselves.
Fat shaming us out here.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, get a run, buddy. Go for a run. I got you. I'll call cadence. But
I'm gonna jump in real, Matt. Men, when they first come out, we've seen this. I don't have any statistics. I'm not best on this. And jump on me. Men tend to drink and women eat, and they will stay inside. And this is what we've seen over and over, which is why the Team Red, White, and Blue, I love all these groups. There are 35,000 registered veteran charities, and I do everything I can to tell people sign up for something and do this for what Matt and Dylan are just hitting. Because if you want someone to help find a job, they need to find an outlet where they can express themselves and do this. I think this is universal, but in particular with a group that has been into the team mode their entire formative adult years, right? Those first years at 18, team. And now, right now it's and I have to pay bills.
No. You're absolutely right. It becomes so individualistic when it's been a team game for such a long time. And another really weird thing, and I'm sure Matt is probably more well versed in this than I am, but like it's kind of a weird, shocking realization here. It's like, yeah, you're now competing with all of your peers. I was like, what do you mean I'm competing with all of my peers? College, work. It's like, yeah, you're technically competing with people for a position. I'm just like, but why? There should be work enough for everybody.
Common goal. There should be a common goal, a common purpose that you're fighting towards. That's what we're used to. But yeah, no, just on the last bit on the network piece is just that you don't know even like the employment opportunities that come from that, and the amount of comfort that a veteran can get from having somebody recognize their skill set and say, hey, I have a buddy that actually runs this company and they're looking for somebody over here, like things like that. I think that's just for the veterans that may be a part of this call, maybe less on the employer side, but even for the employers, if you want to get involved and you want to familiarize yourself with veterans and what they're going through on kind of a personal level, like finding these organizations. I just referenced the one, that Team RWB, but Karen said, like she said, there's tens of thousands of these. And so for you to get involved in some way to extend yourself and to put yourself in a position where you can actually just have real down-to-earth conversations with veterans and find out what they're going through and what their motivations are, what they're passionate about, because that alignment of culture and passion, that's really where the magic's going to happen.
So you kind of dipped into the next question, which is great. But it was going to be more on that clinical side of like supporting, what a few of you just mentioned, but Matt just so eloquently described, is that alignment of culture and passion. Is that what you said? That's beautiful. So yeah, like alignment of goals, culture, passion, purpose. How can a clinician hold that space, find traction with that person, support them in that journey in a way that's productive and not just fluff? Right? Like, what are some things that clinicians can do, or what are some things you wish a clinician did for you, or maybe somebody did for you that were really like substantial in terms of supporting that process specifically? So this you're speaking to this audience of 269 people, like they're a captive audience, and this is maybe the most applicable question for them. So attendees, take notes.
So the very first thing in this is, I guess I just have to hit this giant nail that's sticking out on the head, is listen. Is like, number one is actually listen to what they're talking about and ask questions to draw more out of them. Because a lot of times, I mean, the most comfortable thing that anybody in the world, the thing that we're most comfortable with discussing, any person on the face of the planet, is themselves, because we know ourselves more than anything else. We're with ourselves all the time, whether we want to be or not. And so I think engaging in that conversation with the desire to learn, with a sense of curiosity to learn more about who they are and what drives them and what makes them tick. Because if you focus on that route, you focus on like their internal motivation, like the intrinsic motivations that people have, that these veterans have, then your ability to assist them to get them the right resources at the right time. Again, this goes to something that was brought up on one of the slides earlier, was talking about sequencing. A lot of times veterans don't understand the proper sequence in order to do something. Like I worked, like I said, with the Small Business Development Center, and I worked with probably over 100 veterans who wanted to start their own business. And I had the opportunity there to help them with sequencing specifically, but I was only able to do that the way that I started every single conversation when I was in that consultant position for them, was tell me what you're passionate about. Like, what's driving you? Because they come in with this idea and they're like, I want to start this business. And it might be something that is extremely confusing of how somebody could be passionate about it, like a vending machine business. I didn't understand how this person came in, and they were just jumping up and down talking about how amazing this is going to be. And I was like, okay. So, but it was really important. We spent probably 30-45 minutes I just allowed them and just ask questions just to draw out all of that passion and to figure out what it is about that business that actually got them so excited. Because it's not a naturally exciting business on itself, but it had to do with freedom. It had to do with controlling their own time, kind of leading towards passive income so they could pursue these other things that they're also really passionate about, because that's not the business they really want to have. They saw that as a stepping stone to get to this other place. And the only way that I was able to figure that out is by letting them express their passions, letting them go through it, asking them questions, and then finding what's kind of pushing them that's a little bit down deeper. And some veterans are, like I said, a lot of people are comfortable talking about themselves, but at the same time, veterans, when they're communicating with somebody that's not a veteran, that's actually why the SBDC brought me in, because I am a veteran, and they knew that veterans were more comfortable having those conversations with another vet. And so it may be a little bit more work. It's most likely going to be a little bit more work, because the veteran knows that if you're not a veteran and you're servicing them, they may clam up a little bit. And so it might take a little bit more to actually get that out.
I agree. I think when people come to VME, we have almost every month like a new membership meetup for those that just join. And it's really just people going around, but I think it's the peer-to-peer resource sharing. And in this case, for you as clinicians, it's asking questions. And I find that no one knows when you ask them, what are you passionate about? They don't even know where to begin unless they're specific. Like Matt said, I've already had this idea. The majority don't even know where to begin. So I start with baby steps with our whole group is like, well, okay, have you looked at any groups? And I usually start, well, if you could be on any TV show or work on anything or read any book or write any book or be a musician, what would you be? And I know that's simple, but most of us carry one of the things that I would send overseas all the time are military to the military graphic novels, comics, DVDs, different things like that. And people would absorb them. Betty arranged for 150 DVDs to go out with Coast Guard ships. I don't know if many know our coasties go out on these ice, and I'm working it in, Betty, these ice cutters that go up to the North and South Pole to deliver supplies to our scientists that work there. And they could be 4 months without communications, right? 4 months. And that is a loud ship breaking through ice. So having DVDs, having books, a lot of them spend time on that. So if you get them talking about that, they talk about what they like. They're really telling you what they like about what they want to do for their themes. They just don't know. I use that as a way to get them to start speaking about themselves. It's like a side entrance, if you will, to start talking about more things. But it's really helping them with baby steps. And I don't know how much time you get to step them. Have you looked at any resumes you like or any bios you like? Instead of have you done it, have you looked at anything like this? Have you examined this? Because most don't even know this. And if you want to be something, go on LinkedIn and look up that title, look at what those resumes and bios are, copy it, start putting your own name. What do I have to do? And so really though, this is part of the key that I keep saying, veterans are 3 times more likely to volunteer. So part of this is like, well, what are you doing outside of the time while you don't have a job? Because idle hands and idle time doesn't have to be a veteran, no one good, right? It drives everybody crazy. We just all lived through COVID. We all know that. So can you imagine being in this box and you're thinking, oh my God, my rent's due. And I'm going to step back on this and ask Matt, Dylan, and Mel to help me out on this. But as many of you know, when you're in the military, you're not really worried about your rent. You're not really worried about your water bill. When people come out of the military, come to Los Angeles, they're like, what's a water bill? Why do I have to bring my own refrigerator here? Because the military is Uncle Sam takes care of that because they want you focused on the mission. So vets, they don't know they don't understand that. So they're embarrassed to say that. They're embarrassed to bring that up, that they don't even have some of those basic skill sets. They went from, if life was good to them, they went from a home which they were taken care of and they never thought about that. And if they went in the military, now they're really not thinking about it unless they're a vet that's moved off base. But if they're in that in-between spot, which most do, about 8 years service, most of them haven't really had to do that. They were about their phone in their car. And so there's a little bit of, oh my God, I didn't really learn the skill set. I don't know how to tell someone that. So you just bring it up. Bring it up. Look, I know it's a transition. I know that you may or may not have learned this. I know this, right? And how do you, what can help? And I think that helps if you lean into that. And just say, we know. And like I said, you talk about the emotional side of this. It is emotional. And you've heard this often, which makes it more dependable and reliable for you all. Like Betty is very compassionate and empathetic. Doesn't mean she's a pushover. She'll hold you. She's all being nice here, but she'll hold you accountable, which is good because we all need that. Like I just learned that 10,000 steps isn't actually just 5,000 a day, which I thought it was 5,000 half steps make 10,000, but that was a bummer. So we are all trying to hold ourselves accountable, and that's what you're really doing. But it's, I hope I gave you some things that were a little bit more clear there. I'll write them in this because I realized that turned into a full-blown ramble.
So just to touch on a few things that you're talking about there, about like, the military would provide all of these things to you. Just to bring this back here, most people join the service very early on into their life, like 18 to 21 usually. Many people do not have the concept of all of the bills you would need to pay as an adult. And in doing so, you now have mid-20-year-olds and older re-entering the world who have not had the concept of either rent, a water bill, an energy bill, to some extent, depending on the special individual in question, you don't even go to the groceries. So all of that taking into consideration, they are walking into this, and it is a very scary place very quickly, given how alone they probably feel.
We're lucky in our group. We have John Huertas. I don't know if you guys know him. He started out in Generation Kill. He was an Air Force vet, and then he's a actor on the NBC show This Is Us and things like that. So he comes back and speaks. And so it's nice to have the speakers come and talk to vets where he talks about having a business plan each year for himself. And that helps put that in the veteran's head, right? Oh, I have to have a business plan for myself because I'm going to learn new things. So instead of I'm embarrassed that I don't know how to pay bills, it's I'm going to learn the civilian way of life. And when you phrase it as like you're going to go through these learning modules, right? We call it sequencing. You're going to learn all these little steps, just like in basic training each week. You learn the military culture, you're now going to learn the civilian culture.
And to once more just kind of touch on, oh crud, I just had a brain fog moment from hell.
Sounded like you were going to agree with everything I say, Dylan. Say, oh my gosh, that's so brilliant, you and Matt and Mel. But I've been
doing that already.
I'm teasing. It was good. So, Aynisa, are we answering your question? Are we getting there? Because I feel like we're so excited in some ways to have an audience, and Dylan, you're really rocking it today, and I'm really pleased. And this is heartfelt. And Matt, I want your microphone. But this is the reality of human beings are messy, and I say that. And it's nice when someone is that honest with you when you're sitting with a vet. Wouldn't you say, guys, ladies? Just we're all messy. We don't all have it all figured out. You don't have to have it figured out. But what you can't do is sit still. You have to move forward. So that's baby steps. So in between now and then, it's little assignments. Talk about what you're passionate about. What are we going to be doing and looking at? Is there a career? I send people on what I call LinkedIn. It's kind of like you just use these treasure hunts. Come back to me with 10 resumes of jobs that you would think you'd like in this industry by next week. Things like that. So now they're doing, and they're looking, and they're coming, and they're reporting, which is structure we understand and know in the military. Because now I'm going to not just give you 10 resumes, I'm going to probably organize them and put them in a PDF with little pictures and rank them. And right, it's going to be this whole thing. But it's giving them specific tasks because we understand that.
And
that's
and what
to piggyback off what you guys are saying, and whoever was just about to talk, Dylan, please continue. But also think about like what you don't like is important as well. Like sometimes veterans will come to me and be like, I really don't like this stuff. And I'm like, okay, that we know what you don't want to pursue then, right? Dylan, please continue. Sorry, that just made me think.
No. Thank you for talking, because it reminded me the point of what I actually wanted to touch on. Because I'm like, oh yeah, the original topic of this entire thing. What can clinicians do to actually help the messed up head cases that is all of our fellow veterans? And I think the best thing that I could wish any professional to have done to an earlier version of me, and even me right now, is to go, what do you want? And just continuously say, what do you want, until I give you an answer. And then continue to pry into that answer, not in a bad way, but it's just like, I just want to be comfortable. Okay, then, what's comfortable to you? And just pull out the details that they want in a positive direction. And you could do the same thing in the opposite way of what don't you want. But the idea is just pulling out just that little tidbit of direction, so that this way, because most of the time, I have no idea what the hell I want. I'm male.
And I would say most people don't. Even when you think you're doing and you achieve what you want in life, you're like, well, what's next, right? And so it's the climbing that ladder and exploring. General Leonardo, because that's what I'm going to now call you. That was a great thing, I think, and I should have mentioned it. One of the big notes is it's also important to know what you don't want, right? And I think that's also sometimes a backdoor into the same thing of like, okay, what are the 10 things you don't want, right? Or what are the, instead of the 2 things you do want? Because sometimes we're afraid to express our innermost desires, right? Because we don't feel we're confident enough to go back to school, or we don't do this, whatever it might be. And so sometimes it's, you know, circling the wagon in a different way. So that was really a good point, because we have used that before. It's like you know something about the social work.
Sometimes you think you know what you don't want, but sometimes the things that you do want is actually something you don't want. So I would say just jump in there and experience whatever you know. It's true. When I was in college, I wanted to be an accountant. And so I interned at HBO to be an accountant. And then when I realized I don't get to engage with people, I got upset. I said, I don't want to do this, but I literally wanted to be an accountant. So I did the next best thing, which was research, and I got to deal with people and numbers. But it's really good to just jump in there. You don't know what you want or don't want if you're not jumping in there and taking a risk. So
And Betty,
risk.
darn right, it's about, oh, sorry. I'm sorry to,
Please.
no, I was speaking, jumping in, sorry, I was interrupting. So I was going to say that's a great point about jumping in and just doing, and telling people the first job doesn't have to be the best job. The point is you're moving forward and you're figuring it out. It's literally, you need to keep moving. That's why I always offer the nonprofit work right away to anybody in your neighborhood, whatever you might be doing. I have 200 of my veterans are all different kinds of veteran services, from clean the beaches to repairing music instruments, mountain biking, hiking, and working with other people. And what they're doing is find that tribe. But what Betty, to your point, is just get in the mix and allow yourself to grow. And that's what I was saying earlier, is being resilient and fluent. Vets know that being resilient, no matter what, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. That is true in civilian life.
By the way,
yeah,
even though I interned that one summer, they kept hiring me during my winter breaks for college, and I was able to save some money. So jump in there. You never know what opportunity might arise for something that you need, right? Like, but anyway, go ahead, Karen. This is brilliant. You're
Betty,
like the
this is
Yoda.
great. And I think for a lot of you, if you have veteran examples of vets, and I'm always happy to provide them, that people started off, that's why every month we just have other vets come back and speak about all the hardship. It's the same story. It's the origin story. It was really hard. I felt alone. Nobody listened. This happened, this happened, this happened, right? It's constantly getting this, this reinforcement that I'm not alone in this path.
I think
that's for everybody though, right? Yeah.
I think all of this is incredible. This is great. Like I'm enjoying observing this as well. From Karen and Dylan and Betty, that was really good. My head keeps going back to like the antecedents to this, like thinking about like super practical, tangible things when you're communicating with that veteran. Like what has to come first? Because if you want to provide assignments for them to do, if you want them to start communicating with you effectively, you have to have a relationship, and you have to develop that relationship. You have to develop trust with this person. And I think one of the most important aspects when it comes to that, especially for veterans, is having a sense of vulnerability and being able to be vulnerable with them, because that opens the door for them to feel comfortable to start opening up to you. And so finding those opportunities where, you know, the path's not going to be exactly the same, but something that's somewhat relatable to an experience that they may have shared with you, or just common experiences that you know that veterans go through, based on the things that we're discussing. But being willing to put yourself in that position where you could be judged, as the person who's there to help the veteran, because I think that really opens the door to that trust. And then when we're diving into those assignments, to go out on LinkedIn and find the 10 resumes, then I'm much more enthusiastic about that at that point, because I feel like there's actually like a working relationship that's happening there. So I just wanted to throw that in as well.
So I have a question about this, because in terms of talking about vulnerability, veterans tend to not want to be vulnerable. Ironically, neither do men.
Yeah, that's exactly my point, is that if you want them to be vulnerable, it's like you have to do it first. like not
Uh,
the veteran. You can't expect the veteran to just open up and like, you know, share
Like-
all of their inner deepest motivations and fears and dreams and hopes. But from the practitioner side, from the person who's trying to help them, I think that that's why it's so important for them to be vulnerable as well, to share an experience that they had going through a transition in their life, or even somebody that they know, and sharing like those things that you wouldn't typically want to tell someone because it's kind of embarrassing. Like, yeah, no, I had to go on food stamps for a couple of months, you know, and or things like that, and just letting them know that like I've been in this tough spot. Like I haven't been in this transition, and I know that that's really hard for you, but I've been through some hell, and this is it, and I'm willing to share this with you. And I think
It's-
that opens up the door.
The thing is, I think it might open up the door to some. For others, it might be a little bit more difficult. For instance, like I had really, I could empathize with someone's vulnerability, but just because someone was vulnerable with me doesn't mean I want to be vulnerable with them. However, I am probably very stupid, and the thing that would probably get me across the finish line, as ironic as the sound, is probably food. Like if you just wanted to like, hey, you want to grab a burger? And I just be like, you know what? Yeah, sure. Let's grab a burger. And it's something that takes you like outside this like office environment or something like that, where you sit down and like you have a burger or a coffee, and then you're talking. It humanizes the experience a lot, and I think that makes it a lot easier to make a connection.
So I think if we want to combine our tactics, I think we have a vulnerability burger. This is
A vulnerability burger. I love it.
the one
I think it's
takeaway.
Somebody
probably-
trademark it.
A t-shirt's already in production.
I think, I mean, it's such a hard position for someone like you folks to be able to talk to someone who's coming from such a suspicious place and feeling already misunderstood and really missing their family. That is their found family in the military. And I think you guys are very experienced and very knowledgeable and have a lot of cases, is being able to read, is it a Matt in the room or a Dylan who I'm being vulnerable at, right? But the reality is, it's just, I think most vets, if understanding, is like, we're trying to find a plan. We're trying to figure this out together. And we need to get to know each other together. I think that's really the start. The keyword is trying to find a plan, right? There is no set plan. And then like, and saying now that I've attended this 2-hour panel, I know everything about vets. There, of course, laugh. But if you've had experience with veterans before, or family members that served, or friends that served, or heard the story, I think it always helps, because then they feel like I'm not walking in a room that someone might feel like they have. And I do hear this, and this is unfortunate. They feel veterans are misunderstood because of the political environment, or because of very misunderstood by that. Why would someone join the military when instead of something else with their life? It's a very alien thing when less than a few % of the entire population is joining. And the veteran population looks just like America. I think I'll put this out. Oh, thank you, Mel, for putting it out about VME. You know, our group is 41, almost 42% diverse. We have members from 30 some different countries that came to the US military for a pathway into the military. You don't get accelerated citizenship, but you get bonus points, right? I went and served well. And we have members of all ages and walks of life. I had a top end producer call and said, I need a pilot to consult on something. Well, fixed wing, rotary. Yeah, any guy you got. I said, I also have girls, right? I have this. So I have women that have flown Black Hawks in the middle of the night to rescue people off a mountain. I have another woman that has flown the presidents around. All of this stuff. So I use that to help people understand that the military veteran looks just like everybody on this panel, all different walks of life, all different interests. They just have something in common. They raise the right hand to serve. And now they're looking to still be of service, even if they don't know how to say that right away. And you're all in a career that is of service. You're helping us become better people, civilians and veterans alike. And I think drawing some parallels to there, like, I'm also of service. I think it's important. I have to tell my vets all the time that you're not alone in this walk. Everybody's trying to be of service to each other. So I don't know if that was really that helpful. It sounded helpful in the beginning, and then it kind of went a little south there for a few minutes because I'm getting these private messages, but I did hope it helped.
There's
Risa,
like,
you're
yeah.
my new fan club. Thank you, Risa.
There's one more question I really want to bring up, and I don't want to cut anyone off if they had a thought they wanted to continue off of the last one.
We all have ADHD here. You're fine. Go for it.
So just to like, we're going to rewind kind of all the way back to beginning here, but I think it's really important to highlight this one question of, let's talk about transferable skills and how to communicate about that with veterans, right? Like somebody who says, hey, I was infantry, or I did this, or I did that. Like, how do you engage in those conversations in a helpful way? And I know this is kind of like we have 12 minutes left, not enough time to cover this, but if you could give a tidbit of advice, because I think that's a huge challenge that veterans face, and it's like a super valid one. And I've had a lot of men and women sit in front of me, and I'm just like, I don't even know what to tell you here. Where do we start? Let's figure this out, right? And I think that's so important. Dylan, go for it.
I see
I
Dylan's
want-
finger is just getting higher and higher.
I'm not even on this panel, and I want to interject to say this is literally Lily's area of interest. Oh, I
That's literally
together.
Melanie. No, down, bad. This is me praising Lily now.
Dylan, you want to speak? No?
No. Genuinely, my entire thing was just like, this is a really wonderful and well-pointed question. Cue Lily.
So one of the things I do when I see an MOS with which I, as a civilian, am not familiar with, first place I go is Google. I basically Google it, and usually the service branch will have like a job description. And just literally this morning, I was helping a Marine veteran, once again, a young guy looking to make a transition after he graduates college with a Bachelor of Science. So I didn't know what he did. And so I looked it up and I found a job description for the exact same job. I said, oh, this is really great. So I copy and pasted it onto his, revised resume. I said, okay, you're going to go through every single one of these duties. You're going to remove the ones that are not pertinent to you. You're going to add ones that you did do. Most of all, please try to recall your accomplishments, because that's what corporate America wants to know. Not, chapter and verse what you did as a duty, responsibility, but what you individually did in that particular role. So hopefully he's working on it diligently now. There's so much information online. It's really great. And the service branches are really good about posting what, an 11B is, say, for the Army. I learned, through painful experience, it's a huge category. So you can't possibly do justice to it. So I'd say, okay, we found a generic description. You tell me, am I close? And then we go back and forth. And hopefully the service member will remember what he or she did. And a great place to start is the awards, medals, commendations, and badges. Because I tell them, contrary to what more than one decorated combat veteran has told me, the services don't give out these awards like they were holiday candy. You earned it. You went above and beyond. Claim credit for those. And if you have specific citation and verbiage, that's a really good place to start. The other thing that many veterans don't think to do is, one, you're honorably discharged, proactively add that onto your LinkedIn profile and your resume, because I don't assume, as someone reading resumes and LinkedIn profiles, that everyone was honorably discharged. We know the reality. Unfortunately, there's general and there's also dishonorable, right? Qualities that you really want to highlight. I actually compiled a worksheet of these really kick-ass traits that veterans basically developed during their time in uniform. I beg everyone, go through, look at all the different, traits, competencies, and all that, because I really do want to see that in a resume, especially on the front page. Because if I'm looking for someone who has to display some resilience because it's a really tough job, I want to know that you're a problem solver. You can think on your feet. You can perform under pressure, which is something that very, very few civilians can brag about, unless, you literally were there September 11, you were among the first responder, blah, 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 and all that. Dylan wants to say something. Yeah.
So I genuinely don't want to cut you off, but just
No, go
as
ahead.
a really wonderful point to point out, veterans don't realize, yes, being a veteran gives you a lot of blanket caveats, work well under pressure, know how to work in teams, etc. But your specific job has so much more to offer than the technical specs that the job entailed. It has given you social and intellectual tools that you can put on the resume because you are being worked in a very specific manner to do very specific things. So those things may not be part of your job description, but they were what you developed and cultivated to do your job.
And this is where Karen's going to talk about the human connection, because I sit down and I say to them, oh my gosh, tell me a little bit more about being a helicopter airframe mechanic. What did that entail? All right, that sounds really, really tedious. All these certifications, and you had to perform under terrible weather. You were deployed a number of times, and then you draw them out, and then they tell you, oh, I was twice deployed to Afghanistan. Well, it doesn't show up anywhere in your documents. We got to put that in. You got to send me these entries, and it's constantly reminding. So in some ways, a civilian like me is the best person because I don't know. I was like, I don't know what you do in this particular MOS. Please explain it to me like a lay civilian. Please help me make it accessible to corporate America, because chances are the person reading your resume, your LinkedIn profile is going to be a woman of a certain age and generation, because we populate HR in corporate America. And if we don't understand it, and again, this is one of the realities I share with everyone, you have 5, 10, 15 seconds to make an impression with your resume. And if there aren't buzzwords, if your headline, if the information, if your executive or career summary doesn't resonate with the job description, whatever, they're going to chuck it and go on to the next person. It's that fast. They're under such pressure to produce and, fill that role. So it's worth the time to basically create a really great foundational resume master template. And from that version, you can basically customize it to a specific industry, company, a specific opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not one size fits all. You want to convey to your would-be employer, you're the one that I want. I choose you over all others, and this is why. So it gets back to my original point about time not always being on our side, because there's so much that you need to expend on due diligence. Yes, Dylan.
Betty has a really wonderful question, and I'm going to highlight the crap out of it. She had typed out, some companies are now using AI to browse resumes. How does one prepare for that? I know, using particular language and certain keywords are super important to that.
Yes.
Is that all you need is special keywords and how to set up the resume correctly? You would know, obviously, Lily. Okay,
so all right, there has some people try to basically embed keywords in a cheating way, and by that I mean they shrink the typeface so it basically, to the unaided eye, it looks like a solid line across your document, right? So I look at keywords, and if they're not organically embedded into your description, your accomplishments, by the way, I'm going to cop to former copy editor at 3 newspapers. So I'm a print dinosaur, and we're the anal retentive types who read every single word, look at every single piece of punctuation, because you're going to be called out if you miss something. All right. So my ideal, what I advise everyone to do, is to work in keywords and phrases naturally, organically into all of your content, whether it's the way it flows in your personal biography or in your career summary in your resume, or the about segment on your LinkedIn profile. All right. If you're just throwing in keywords on your LinkedIn about, I know that you're too lazy to come up with a way to work in these terms into your biography. All right, you're too lazy, or you're relying on, God forbid, ChatGPT or AI or something like that. All right. Now, I don't know how corporate America deploys these applicant tracking systems. The really sophisticated ones can be programmed to have keywords a minimum number of times in your documents, or they will auto reject you, which I think is really insidious. All right. So
Lily,
content really does count.
Lily, can I interject again? Hi, my name is Melanie. I'm a Marine Corps vet. I'm on the VMHTI committee that puts these together, and I work with Amelia and Aynisa. I'm not on the panel, but we are winding down, and I want to say Lily's contact information is in the chat. She could have a masterclass about resume workshops, which she does pro bono for veterans. Please reach out to her. I met her when I was a student at Fordham, and I, as a first generation veteran college student, did not know how to make a resume. Lily worked with me one-on-one, and I didn't even understand the power. Seeing all the things I had accomplished for the first time in a professional format because of Lily's work and mentorship was such a self-esteem boost. Like, it made me feel so validated, and it was the beginning of my ability to overcome imposter syndrome because of the work Lily did as a civilian advocate. So please utilize her as a resource. Please utilize all of these amazing panelists as a resource. They do amazing work, and I'm going to turn it over to Aynisa because I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and Aynisa and Amelia have to do an outro or something. So thank you.
I mean, my outro is really quick. The panel, you guys are amazing. Just so great to work with such like strong, empowered men and women who've served the country and now continue to serve in several capacities, not only in the civilian workforce, but doing these educational panels as well, equipping clinicians like me to continue the work that we do and do it better because of you. So thank you for your openness and insights. And it was a pleasure moderating this with all of you. I'll turn it over to Amelia.
If Amelia's not here, I can.
Oh, Amelia's here.
Oh, perfect. All right, excellent.
Amelia's here. That was a great.
We got to talk about
feels like everyone was like already knew each other and everyone's friends. I don't know. That was a great. Someone said you should start a podcast. I totally agree. That was a great program. Thank you.
We have the setup with Matt's microphone.
This
too.
is true. Everyone's coming over. Matt.
Everyone just wants Matt's microphone. I have no idea
There's
what's
room.
going on.
I'm not going to take that as an innuendo of any kind, and you guys are all welcome over.
Matt does podcasts.
I do podcasts.
It looks like it. I just want to echo all of the thanks and gratitude, and just everything coming in the chat box. Everyone, of course, is saying thank you. This is excellent. The podcast, multiple times podcasts are mentioned. Everyone really appreciates all the time that people gave to us this evening for this program, and I want to make sure that everyone on the panel is able to read through that. Thank you again, Aynisa, as well, and Melanie for being the coordinator extraordinaire. She's the one that got all of these people together and made sure that there is representation from all areas, and also brings us the delight of her cat. So thank you, most importantly, for that. I want to go over our CE information again. So I've thrown the evaluation link into the chat box. I just want to make mention of that. So in order to receive your CE certificate, you must attend the entirety of this program. Great job, you've done that. And then you will have to complete the evaluation that's going to be sent to you in the email address that you registered with. I also am throwing it into the chat box, just so if you want to grab it now and start, you can do that. I know some people have a little anxiety about making sure they get the email. It's going to take about 10 minutes to get that email. Zoom has to do its thing. Email has to do its thing. It'll take about 10 minutes. So if you want to grab it right now, it's in the chat box. You must complete that by this upcoming Monday, the 9th of September, and you will receive your CE certificate within 10 business days of this presentation. It'll come as a downloadable PDF, because if you ever need to submit it, you will have to submit it as a PDF. Beyond that, please feel free to reach out with any questions. Thank you everyone for taking time out of your week to be at this program. And thank you, big thanks again to all the panelists for joining us and giving us your times themselves tonight.
Amelia, may I say one last thing? Thank you.
Yes.
If you do a survey, could you share with myself or any of the panelists, the veterans, anything that we can do to help improve the way we communicate with all of you and how we can best be of service to you for being of service to our fellow veterans?
Amelia and I can share the feedback. So for all the for all the attendees, if you have a comment directly for these panelists, feel free to share that, and we will make sure that the raw data gets to them so that they can self-review. If you guys want to watch it again, because there's so much to digest, and Lily, I mean, she is a masterclass at like packing a massive amount of like high level, high caliber information into like any amount of time. She's amazing. This whole panel will be posted for free on the Niswani's YouTube channel. So you'll have that to enjoy.
I also want to just give you a shout out, Melanie, for asking us to be part of this and for all the work that you did behind the scenes in support of this organization, and you do for veterans so quietly and so helpfully. So thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And if anyone puts in the survey, go Bills, I have heard by rumor that you will get good karma this year. That's just what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that.
Yeah.
But
Bill,
thank you.
Lies
Thank you,
and
Lily.
shenanigans.
Slander.
everyone.
Matt and Dylan.
Thank you, everyone.
For your service, Betty.
We're
you
getting
know,
a lot
always
of Go
back
Bills
there.
now.
love you
Oh, boy.
guys. Thank you. Go Bills. We need it. It's our year.
Bye.
It's our year.
Bye,
Third
everyone.
generation
Thanks.
fan. Thank you.